Let's start with the 100 questions every first time buyer should ask. Question numbers 35 through 37. So when I make an offer, what contingencies should I include? I really think that this section should be called, or this segment should be called, what contingencies could I include? Because depending on the market that you're in will determine what contingencies are available to you. While there are a litany of things you can put into a contract, any additional contingency will make the seller reconsider whether or not they should sell their home. In a buyer's market, you have more flexibility. And a buyer's market is really just one where the property stays on the market for an extended period of time.
And to start, we have the contingencies we see most often, which are going to be the financing contingency. And we have different forms for each type of loan. So whether you're using a VA loan, a FHA loan, or a conventional loan, each of those has a different contingency that are worded slightly differently. And then the other contingency we see on nearly all offers is going to be your home inspection contingency, which also includes a clause for radon testing. So we're going to talk a little bit about the financing contingency, which is question 36. And that is going to give the buyer the opportunity to back out if they are not able to get loan approval.
I wouldn't really say that it's a back out clause, but it is a clause that helps you to iron out some of the details of the contract, because the way the home buying process works is a little jarring when you consider the fact that you go see a property, maybe in the property for 15 to 30 minutes. 30 minutes is a lot of time, but you go see a property for 15 minutes and then you decide whether or not you're going to spend $500,000 to $3 million on this property. So the contingencies, in my opinion, are a process of you really getting to know the property and ironing out all of the details. So on the financing side, you go to the lender says, and this is before you actually find the house, hey, look, you can purchase, based on your information you've given us, you could purchase this amount of property, or you can receive this amount of loan. So the contingency allows you to iron out all those details, make sure the lender wasn't lying to you, because there's so many lenders available now and so many people are doing a lot more online shopping that the legitimacy of these corporations or organizations have to be kind of flushed out. So this gives you time as a consumer to flush out those details.
Your financing contingency is going to be tied to the specific type of loan that was indicated on the sales contract. So if you said you're using a VA loan, that means you have to apply for a VA loan. It's important that whatever financing you implied on the sales contract is what you apply for, because in the event that your loan is not approved, you're going to need a rejection letter from the lender saying that you were rejected for the type of loan that was on the sales contract. So if for any reason you decide to change your financing, you would need to add an addendum, have everyone sign it, and the seller would have to agree to you changing your financing. And you would also need to add that appropriate addendum for the change in financing.
So you'll find that in a fast moving market, people are just paying the difference between the sales price and the appraised value, because in a fast moving market or in a appreciating market like the one we anticipate seeing this coming spring, the appraisals are actually going to be behind the market, or they're going to be lagging, right? So people are just going to spend some more money. Either it's going to come out their down payment, or they're going to increase their down payment to cover the shortfall.
So here we talk about if a lender gives you a full commitment. We have one lender that we work with quite often, and she's able to give full loan commitments, or her company, I should say, is able to give full loan commitments before we find a property. So then the only thing we're waiting on is the appraisal. So last year, when the market was really hot, we saw a lot of people waiving the finance contingency if they already had full loan commitment, and the only thing the bank needed was the appraisal. So in that scenario, and actually because of that, the board created a new document that's for financing with someone who just needs an appraisal, which was not an addendum we previously had, because what we had was agents writing their own essentially addendum saying that there's no financing contingency, but there is an appraisal contingency. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if the lender gives you that full approval, then you can no longer have that contingency to use to back out of the sales contract. So if you're not including a financing contingency, then that means that if for some reason, unless the bank folds, if for some reason you're not able to get financing, even though you were told on the front end that you have full approval, you will not be able to use that as a caveat to void the contract. Okay, so next up we have our home inspection and radon testing contingency. So this is going to include your home inspection, but also radon. So it has 3 different sections on this sales contract. We see home inspections either one or two ways in Northern Virginia. We see a home inspection with the option to negotiate or void, and then we have a home inspection with the option, with the option to void only. So when we see a home inspection with option to negotiate, essentially that gives you the opportunity to negotiate repairs if there are some glaring issues or things that you want to have addressed by the seller prior to closing. Even if you want to ask for some type of credit, that's going to be option A, because we're talking about contingencies, and contingencies allow you to get out of the sales contract. If for some reason you decide you no longer want to move forward, you have the option to cancel the contract.
Another way to look at the home inspection contingency or the inspection contingency is that this allows you to verify what you're purchasing. A traditional showing lasts between 15 to 30 minutes. You're not looking at all of the windows, all of the appliances, all of the space in general. You kind of get an idea if this layout works. So the inspection contingency is important because you verify what you're purchasing. And then the next thing is it gives you a almost like a user manual for the property, because a lot of sellers, I mean, in the Northern Virginia, we have a lot of split settlements. So that means that the buyer is going to go to the closing table at one time and they're going to sign all their documents. And then the seller is going to go to the closing table at another time and they're going to sign all their documents. I mention this is because in the olden days, it used to be the buyer and seller would close at the same time and they would be across from one another. And during that closing, there would be an exchange of information. So the buyer would have questions about the property and then the seller would answer those questions. Now, it would be questions that would cause the sale to be ruined or canceled. It would just be like, oh, how do I use this? How do I use that? And then the seller, oftentimes, especially if they've lived in a property for a long period of time, they would have like a list of things they want to get off of their agenda, as far as like, okay, great, like this neighbor is like this, so you just want to be mindful of this, or I have this plant in the backyard, this is what it needs. We don't have that exchange of information anymore. So I believe that home inspection contingencies serve much more than the purpose of finding out what's broken or what works. It also gives you that manual.
Okay, well, speaking of that manual, you will get the full home inspection report from your home inspector. So we say you're going to have a home inspection. That means you're going to have a licensed home inspector come and evaluate the property, and they're going to give you, depending on your home inspector, it could be anywhere from 12 pages to 60 or 70 pages of things, whether it's some safety concerns, minor issues, major issues. And so this is going to be, as Abraham said, your handbook. It could be a list of things that are working perfectly fine, but maybe in 2 to 3 years you may want to reevaluate. So it's going to give you some helpful tips on how you can maintain this home, but also the home inspector is going to show you where the water, where you can turn the water off and things like that, because obviously you wouldn't know that just from viewing the home for 15 to 30 minutes. Now, this report also comes in handy should you decide to void the contract, because if you decide to void the contract, then you have to present this report. Don't have to say why you're voiding it, but you do have to present the report with your notice to void the sales contract. And likewise, if you plan to ask for repairs, you have to present this report with your list of repairs or your request for a credit. If the home was built before 1978, you do have the option to have lead-based paint testing. And then she mentioned here in the book, if you wanted to have a termite inspection, a wood destroy and insect inspection clause is included in our typical residential sales contract. So there is no separate addendum for that.
And lastly, on our list or in the book, it mentions should you have a condo inspected? So condo inspections are going to cost less money because the home inspectors know that more people don't really see a value in them, so they bring the cost down. Most condos, you don't own the windows, so the windows are owned by the association. The author here is saying your electrical system for your unit. So oftentimes condos will have individual electrical panels, and that's true. The home inspector will look at that, but as far as like looking at the parking structure, that is not realistic. I haven't seen a home inspector do that yet. A lot of condo units, even if they're high rises, they have just traditional central air and heating units. So that means that there is a outdoor condenser unit that the home inspector has to go find. Usually it's on the roof, and the roof is not a place for regular people. So I always recommend for my condo buyers that they get the home inspection. It's just a part of the process of buying a property. Why try to save $400 when you can learn as much as possible about your property before you move in and determine if there are any deal breakers that you're not currently aware of? That is our buyer question for today. So we went through questions 35 to 37. What contingencies should you include in your offer?